Peter Turner, where are we?
We are in the Thistle in Heathrow, London.
What's the date today?
I don't know. I never pay attention to time or dates.
What year is it?
2018.
Exactly.
I know the year, just not the date. I don't even know what date it is.
Right?
Yeah, early 2018. We're at the Thistle, the event, the session convention in Heathrow.
Seeing you sitting in front of me today, I would say that it almost from last year, January now, the start of the year, it seems like everything's different for you. Am I right in saying that?
Completely.
Could you summarise in what I think?
In terms of everything, I mean, for the last few months, obviously, I've been through specific hardships that have made me reevaluate my own position philosophically on life, you know. And, after losing my dad and the funeral, the other things that were going on health-wise in between, it's really taught me that, life's for living. And you've got to sort of put yourself out there and you've got to do as much as you can before, you kick it because you're fragile. That's that,
Yeah.
So, and that mantra I sort of took with me last year, and that's gone into overdrive now, but I can't say too much about,
I mean,
even
physically.
Yeah, physically, yeah.
Body weight.
I've lost 6 stone. That's about 70 odd pounds. Career-wise, everything's going as well as it can. I'm working on a range of different television shows, consulting, and I'm presenting some stuff myself, which again I can't say too much about. But everything's just.
I did see a
good.
very interesting video of a contract being signed about 2 days ago.
Yeah,
I don't want to say any more about that.
No, yeah. So yeah, I did sign a contract. I can't say with what company, but it's safe to say that that's the TV arena is the arena that I'm looking at moving into.
So we've opened up, talked about where you are in your life right now. We have a few standard questions we're asking everyone across the board. First question, I asked this to Richard Turner last in Texas, in his house. How do you spend the first 60 minutes of your day? What are your morning rituals?
Every single day is different for me, so I don't have a routine, a lifestyle. And earlier on when you mentioned asking me about the date, I honestly don't know the date today, and half the time I don't know what date it is, and it's not because I'm aloof to what's going on in the real world. It's just one principle or one philosophy that I have is that I'll do what I want when I want to do it. So I wake up whenever I want, I go to bed whenever I want, I stay wherever I want, I travel wherever I want. So trying to have a routine, I think, is very restrictive, and trying to look at times and dates and things like that. When there's important dates coming up, I literally have people that remind me that important dates are coming up now. I just don't know myself. So being honest with you, I watched a lot of documentaries. I fall asleep to documentaries. So the very first thing that I probably do when I wake up is continue watching whatever documentary's on until it finishes, and then I'll get up and I'll start my day.
This is true. I told you in a passing comment about a documentary, like you would say to any of your friends, and then the same night you're like, "Hey, I've just finished watching it now," and it was a flippant, passive moment, and you were straight on it, like.
I love documentaries. They're one of my favourite mediums. One of my favourite areas of film work.
This takes us directly into the next question then. What obsession, other than cards or mentalism and everything you do, because these are the 10 questions, do you explore on evenings and weekends?
I really love music, and I think if it wasn't for music, I probably wouldn't be sat here now. It's one of them things that I think we can all agree that even through the hardest of times, you could just put on a good song or a bit of music, listen to it. But I write music, I compose, so I write very diverse sets of music. Some of it's heavy metal and classical music, and then the acoustic stuff in between. So I compose, I write a lot of songs. Cinematography, I love astrophotography as well. I love going out in the middle of the night to a random place that's so dark when you look up you can see the entire universe above your head. And I go and take photographs of stars, which sounds, it doesn't sound as amazing as it actually is, but when you're out there and you stood on the edge of a cliff, it's dark, there's no one else around, you could shout at the top of your voice and you wouldn't be pestering anybody. You just look up and it's just there above your head. I love that. So that's something that I've started doing more frequently.
I think if you're happy to, we'll show some images on screen to everyone at home now.
Yeah, of course.
See some of your work.
Yeah, of course.
When you get into something, like other than the hobby you're in, like mentalism or whatever, you get it and you go for it. Like, you got into star photography.
Yeah.
You went from taking an amateur picture to a pro picture in like a week, but it was upset. And then you're doing video time lapses of it.
Yes, well,
you never do things by half.
That's it. Well, I get obsessive. I've got Asperger's, so because I've got Asperger's, whenever I can only ever focus in a linear sense. So whenever I get engrossed in something, I'm a big believer in that if you're gonna, you shouldn't waste your time doing it by half, you know. And we have had conversations in the past when I first got into cinematography and started filming stuff. I'd send you videos and they were shit. And I used to say, Lloyd, you know, what's the secret to this? What's the secret to that? And I'm always asking. I'm not afraid of asking. And the cinema.
For hours.
Yeah, that's it.
And then you surpassed me within a month, easy.
Well, the cinematography stuff now is something. I carry a camera with me everywhere. In fact, one thing that a lot of people don't know, and I have my own personal cinematographer that's on hand 24 hours a day, every single day of my life, which is great. So whatever time, wherever I want to travel to, I just ring them up, say, we need to do this, and then out we go and we do it.
So what's your intention with that? Is that to blog? Or vlog even? Is that to capture those special moments when...
I found that the most interesting moments ever happen when nobody else is around. And it might just be a performance that's in a bar off the cuff. It might be that I witnessed something that most people never get to witness, or I'm traveling somewhere in the world that most people will never get to travel. And I used to go there and the memory were great, but I never had anything to bring back. So it's almost like I've got constant keepsakes and I stockpile footage. So I've got hard drive upon hard drive of footage, you know, and hard drives of footage, and I just dip back into it when I need for whatever. I call it the B-roll buffet.
You know what's good though? It's like, it's not just for you, it's like you've got kids too. And just saying you're in a hardship, just before a couple of days before your father recently passed away, you recorded an interview.
I did. I interviewed my dad. That's it. Yeah. And my son loves cinematography. He's very good with a camera. You know, he's going 10. He's 10 tomorrow, in fact. And he's
Is he?
Yeah. So I do know the date today. It's the 14th.
Ah.
There we go.
Good man.
So I do know the important dates.
Short question, could be long, could be easy, but it's a short question. What does this art mean to you?
Well, life is the simplest answer. It's just my entire life, you know. It means as much to me as my family. It means as much to me as my best friends, and only because, in all honesty, my life was probably headed for destitute. You know, I was in a time I was sleeping on an overweight, obese guy's couch. He was so fat he used to throw up into a bucket at the side of his bed.
I've never had a bucket by the side of my bed.
And all he did was claim benefits. I was working 3 jobs. I used to work in a bar, I used to work in a factory, and I worked in a warehouse as well at the same time. So I'd cycle, and I was doing like 18 hours to make ends meet. And I just couldn't do it, you know. And the only fun pastime I ever had were going down to the pub, doing nothing. And you know, so this sort of changed my life entirely. It's taken me around the world. You know, I've met amazing people. I've worked on so many different TV shows, and I've met new friends like yourselves, you know. So to me, I owe everything to it.
So where would you be without it then?
Honestly, I'd probably be dead. And that's not even a joke. I had no reason to live. I had my son. When this started to take off, then I had my son. We were in a more comfortable position to be able to provide for him. But if it wasn't for my kids and this, then I'd have no purpose, you know. And they say, what's the meaning of life? Well, I think it's a very subjective question, but the answer for me is this.
Beautiful answer.
You know?
Beautiful answer. I don't think you can sum it up in any other way. So, this next question has nothing to do with the last one, which I'm kind of sad about, but we've got to ask them to everyone, which is, but I'm sure you have good story. You have tricks created directly for this question. I've seen you talk about it. Have you ever felt discouraged by an audience before? Where was it? How did you bounce back?
Well,
this is going to be a good one.
Like yourself, I mean, I watched a documentary about your town, and I don't mean to bring your town up, but the people in your town are very much similar to the people in my town, and they have no patience for anything. And I get asked a lot why I tend to write longer performances for myself, because, you know, out of 5 or 6 effects I'll do, there'll be one effect that's slightly elongated with a story in it. And the reason that I elongate those effects is because I never had that artistic liberty when I was performing to people from my town, just because they wouldn't sit and listen. And every single audience were the worst audience that you could work with. It wasn't just one. But I always, and this is a good lesson I think for people that are getting into this or become, you know, from beginner to amateur, amateur to pro, you should never see a mistake as something that's discouraging. You should encourage mistakes. And everybody sits thinking, well, why would I want to encourage a mistake? Well, because you learn from mistakes, and you can only be the best that you can be by failing so many times. You know, and it's about getting back up, getting back on the horse, and then riding again. So, in all honesty, I've never been discouraged by having a bad show, but, and I'm sure Adam will tell you this, when I was doing a show in Manchester, and I perform live very infrequently now because of the consulting stuff. But I did a show in Manchester, and I literally, my dad had died. I'd just got off the phone with my sister about the funeral details, but I couldn't say to my sister, I don't want to talk about the funeral details. I've got a show to go to, because I didn't want her thinking the show were more important than the funeral details. But I'm off the phone, I walk in and I do the show. Now, the show were all right, but in my head, it wasn't the standard that I wanted it to be. And Adam will tell you, I beat myself up. I don't, if I said to you when you were working with me and you didn't pull your weight, I'd take it aside and say, look, that was shit, you fucked up again or whatever. But I'm harsh like that on myself. So after the show, I'm like, I left my mobile phone on during the performance, which we've all done, right? But what I'd usually do, if my phone rings and I've forced somebody a playing card, whatever, I'm doing a routine, the phone will ring and I'll say, wait a second, and I'll pick the phone up. I'll say, yeah, I'm just in the middle of the trick now, yeah. Tell them the card, I will do. Are you thinking of the six of clubs? And I'll then pretend that this were meant to happen, and I reveal this, the six of clubs. Yeah, I'll call you back later then, mate. Thank you for that, bye. Show everybody else, and then boom, I use it as part of the act, and that gets you out of it. But in 10 years, during a performance, I've never left my phone on, ever. And I left it on that night. And I was so pissed off about that, because it's not, for me, it's not about if a script goes wrong or if I can get out of that. I can rearrange the words. If something mechanically happens, I can get out of that. But it's the little loose ends, like the phone going off, that really pissed me off, because I should know better. And it really wound me up, and it ate me for like 2 days over something so small. But I drilled it into my head, don't make that mistake again. You know, little tiny things, like I worked closely with Ryan Tricks, and he did it Facebook Live, the first magician to do a Facebook Live. And I said to him, put a pen in each of your pockets. Because there's nothing fucking worse than watching somebody patting the pockets trying to find a pen during it. You're supposed to look elegant and slick. And he didn't do it. And halfway through he's looking for a pen. And afterwards he comes off and he said, what did you think? I said, it was great, but you were looking for the pen. And he's like, and he now kicks himself the same. But you've seen Ryan's growth.
Yeah.
And that's because of taking care of those little details. You know, so don't be discouraged by your performances.
What you're saying leads directly into the next question on the list, and because the question I just asked you was, what's happened with an audience that's set you off, and you went and you spoke about the mistakes you've made personally, and that goes against. I think that's sort of in line with how you think. You go against the grain always. If everyone's doing it one way, you'll do the other way. So what's a personal belief that you hold that everybody else thinks is insane? I think that kind of ties it directly with.
I think, well. To answer this question, we have to go back in time 5 years. Now, you know, and this is a rather bold claim to make, but I don't mind making it. I created a monster within the mentalism industry, because Propolis were never a thing. Propolis mentalism were never a thing, and I started to do like Propolis, you know, name divinations, Propolis this, and it wasn't to create them because I wanted to make Propolis routines. It was just because that area were not explored, and I were like, right, I want to explore that, and I want it for me. I didn't want it for anybody else, and I've always wrote from my perspective. So if you've ever read anything of mine, watched it, it's always from my perspective, on my terms, on my rules, and I aren't writing to please you. That's it, and I don't mean that rudely. What I'm saying is I'm expressing my perspective, and that's all I can do. And everybody thought that were insane. Everybody back then, oh, it doesn't work, you know, it's too long, it's this, it's that, it's the other. And now we have so many methods for achieving that. But I think you've got to push the envelope, and you've got to push the barriers a little bit further than what anybody else is, in order to be able to. And I'm not saying I've inspired a generation, but in order to.
I think it's safe to say that.
Well, I don't want to say I have, because I think that'd be a bit egotistical. But in order to inspire a generation or to move anything forwards, you've got to think outside the box. Nobody ever got recognised for being the same. You know, nobody ever got recognised for being the same. So I think with everything that I do, I think people would think it right. I'll give you an example. I wanted to learn to lip read. So what did I do?
I've seen you do this. It's genuinely incredible.
Genuinely true. Nobody.
I've seen a trailer for something. Isabella Star 1.
That's
I didn't believe it.
And then
you did it to me.
Yeah. So I plugged my ears up for 2 weeks. I bound my ears every day for 2 weeks, and so I couldn't hear. Plugged them up and just watched people's lips as they talked. And I'm not saying I can use that as a solid method, but I'm saying I genuinely did things like that. And I tried to act blind. Lasted half a day.
Did you?
I put it on, and this is true, and I don't mind saying this. After half a day, I took it off, and I just sort of sat there, and I nearly cried, because I just realised fucking how difficult it is. And you know that question where somebody says, would you rather be deaf or would you rather be blind? Well, I lived as both. I tried both just to see, to see the difference. And I'm going to tell you 100%, trying to live blind it's not easy. It's hurtful when you try it,
Yeah.
So that's probably the most insane thing that I've done, is plug my ears up and try to learn to lip read so that I can subtly read people's lips when I'm working. I don't use that as a method full time. I have 100 different methods, but if I ever catch something, it's always a nice little method that I use that people don't believe works. And you just said it yourself, you didn't believe it worked.
I didn't believe it, genuinely didn't believe it. I think a lot of people watching you have seen your magic and have thought, I don't believe it. And then they see you live in a convention or out in the streets and you do it, and it's almost like the legend is...
Oh, well, thank you.
You spoke about this before, about creating a legend. So you try 10 things, like picking a lottery ticket or something, and every once in a while you say one will hit. And you create
And that's
a legend that lasts, and you seem to hit it 10 times out of 10 usually.
Well, I think the secret there is just to remember that I'm not taking a chance. It's now got to a point where those chances, them things that were chancy, they found momentum, and they started to grow, and then I started to logistify what it is that I was doing, and I analysed it and then scrutinised it, and I really tried to refine it to a point that there's very minimal chance, but it seems very chancy. Right. So now there's a lot of systems that have been created off the back of those bold moments, but I always have something that's surefire to fall back on whenever I'm entertaining for a lay audience. When I'm with magicians, like I said, nobody ever gets talked about for being the same. So I'll take the most ridiculous chances at conventions, because I'll tell you what, if it hits once, everybody talks about it for the rest of the convention, and that's the fun for me. Is
I've got to say, if anyone's listening at home, one of my favourite moments of you ever, you did any card at any number, name any card, name any number, the person dealt down, you put the card face down onto the table, and you give them the chance to look at the card or put it back in the deck, and they decided to not look at it. And there's about 12 of us on a table, and they took the card, they put it back in the deck, and they accidentally flashed the card, and it was the exact card. And everyone on this side of the table freaked out because it was so casual, and everyone on this side of the table, and it was such a contrast, and it shows a level of...
It's a hard moment, is that, from a choreography perspective. One expression that I love of yours is that you don't shit in your own bathwater.
Yeah.
All right, I love that expression. You once said that to me, you don't shit in your own bathwater. And it's so hard knowing that you've essentially hit the perfect burglass effect, and you're just going to let somebody put it back in the deck without looking at it. And you've got to be ready.
Do it.
You've got to, that's it. You just without looking at it, you've got to be ready to shit on your own chips. You've got to piss on your own chips. You just hold your hands up like this, let them put it in there, and you know it's hit. And you're sat like, this could be the biggest moment, but they're not going to look at it. And I prefer the atmosphere that's created from not looking at it than I do from...
That's the type of chance I do like, because you can't go wrong with it, because if it goes back in, it still falls into your storyline. But if they decide to take a chance to turn it over...
Well, that's it. Well, the turnover thing there, I mean, I'm not going to go into what it is, but that were created because I wanted an out that were verbal, but still left everybody with a nice moment to sit and reflect upon.
It's often nicer when they don't turn it.
That's it. I think it's much nicer. If they do turn it over, you run the risk of it being the wrong one, but then you can still cover your back. And again, sorry, this is out of context, we're going off on a tangent here, but you can always say nobody else chose to have the magic ruined for them. So keep a poker face, whether it's right or wrong, look at it, and now put it in. And as they put it in, I go, pretty amazing, right? And I just say that, and I imply to everybody else it's right.
I haven't seen
I imply to everybody else that it were right.
So I know a lot of the guys watching at home are students, massively in the zone right now, trying to learn everything they can. We're trying to keep this short and sweet, because we've got a lot of things to do over here. What's the one piece of advice that you've repeated the most? I'm sure you've got 1,000 things you can offer. What's the one?
It's just be yourself. Don't train yourself classically. I mean, I'm well schooled in the traditional techniques. Always train yourself classically, and that's your fallback. But then go off onto your own path, and just find yourself. And I think if you look at the people that stand out the most in this industry, this community, you'll always find that there's something that's unique about them, and they stand out. There's just something about them, and it's because they've found themselves. And that's the hardest part of magic, and there's no real secret to finding you. You've just got to be a slightly over-accentuated version of your actual self, and you've just got to know what your own limits are and play your strengths, not your weaknesses. You would never take a goalie and put him in midfield.
Yeah.
So the idea is, just the biggest piece of advice I can give you: find your character, refine that character, and just stop caring about what anybody else thinks. Like at the end of the day, do it for you, and everybody else will either love it or hate it, but at least you find your own audience.
Yeah. So, going on a slightly odd question, but I think this is one that's been the most interesting to ask, or one of the most interesting to ask, especially from a diverse range of people all over the world. I do like this question. What purchase, $100 or less, has made the most positive impact on your life in the last 6 months to a year?
$100 per. Do you know what? Honestly,
Or less.
I never buy products. In fact, I did go on a spending.
It could be chewing gum.
It could be anything outside.
Anything has just vastly improved your life.
I don't know. Honestly, the most difficult question anybody's ever asked me in my
So
life.
interesting. Everyone's got a different take on it.
Probably chicken.
Chicken, yeah. Positive impact on your health.
That's it. Chicken.
Chicken and broccoli, or
Vegetables, chicken and rice, anything that's spicy. Nobody can handle
no
spice
more
like me.
Bradford kebabs, Bradford curries.
I still go for curries, so very, very infrequently, but I do still go for curries. I do cheat. No, when I'm eating a pizza now, if I want pizza, I'll have one slice instead of a full pizza. That's it, or two slices instead of a full pizza. If I have a curry, normally I'd have a starter, then I'd have a curry, then I'd have a finish, and then I'd go to a shop and buy some sweets, and then I'd have Coca-Cola and whatever else. Now, if I'm going to get a curry, I'll just have the curry, and that's it. So
the last 6 months,
health-wise, yeah, I've had to. Yeah.
And you look like a different person.
Well, I don't know if that's a good thing.
Yes, definitely. Well, speaking about different person, it kind of ties into the next question, which is, I quite like this. If you were asked to do a TED talk, but you were not allowed to talk about anything to do with magic mentalism, what would you talk about?
If I were,
Yeah.
I'd probably talk about the importance of living life to the full, and I'd give people examples of how they can change small things in the day to maximise the impact of excitement, that they have in their own lives, and that'd be something that I think I'm really passionate about. Is especially, like I say, the recent loss of my dad. Is there were nothing wrong with him. Didn't look ill. Walked every single day. Didn't smoke.
Be an interview.
Rarely drank. Yeah, and it rarely drank. I don't know why. We still don't really know why. But I mean, he was just in his car, went to fly his Falcons, dropped dead. And so it for me, I think, if I were to give a talk about anything, it'd be just about time, and forgetting about the restraints of time and forgetting about the restraints of dates and everything else, and literally just living your life, and don't be bound. And I'll say the same as my dad said: don't be a slave to wages. I'll finish with a story for this question, if you don't mind.
Finish with the story.
Yeah, if that's cool. So this is what I'd give a TED talk on. It's about a fisherman. So there was a man that was supposed to be at work, and he goes down to the beach, and he decides not to go into work, and he decides to fish. And his boss is like, "Where is he? He's not turned up." Rings his house. Where is he? The boss hears on the grapevine that he's gone fishing. So the boss travels down to the beach to visit his worker, and he says to him, "What are you playing at? You're supposed to be at work." And he said, "Well, I wanted to fish." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to tell you." He goes, "This is what you should do." He said, "We've been friends for a long time, so I'm not going to fire you. But you should work your way up the ranks to the point that you have a team of people working for you, and then they have a team of people working for them, and then you can go out and you can fish all day long if you've got somebody working for you." And the fisherman turned around and he says, "Why do I need to do that? I'm fishing now." Right? And I think that's such an important thing. It's such a great little story, and the sentiment there, though, is that why not do what you want now? Don't try to put insurance in place to make it happen later, because it might be too late later. Just do what you want to do.
Go fishing.
And that's it, go fishing. Yeah, so.
Thanks, man.
So I hope that were all right, Lloyd.
Yeah. Guys at Magic Stream are going to love this. Thanks for your time.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Let's go and enjoy this.